Time for a grim stream of Perilous lore. This week, the lore focus is going to be all about the frozen north of Kislev, that place just above the Empire that has a cult following among Warhammer fans, where people love Kislev, but we've never really gotten that much about it. So, tried to cover a lot of the basics and a little bit more. Had some awesome sources for this one. I'm really excited about. Before we get into that focus, we'll have our Black Library recommendation of the week and a little bit about what's gaming recently. Sorry about that. So for what's gaming this week, we had a marathon session of a Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure recording yesterday. It was fantastic. We had a great time. We did 4 episodes at once, and it was just perfect timing for the events in those episodes to take place during a marathon like that. And it was chef's kiss kind of thing. It just went really, really well. There were 1 or 2 things that after we were done, I was like, oh no, I forgot to do this or that in a combat kind of thing. And it was like, combats in WFRP can be kind of difficult. So to run properly, I should say, so that, you miss one thing. That's really good. Probably forgot more than that. We'll find out when those episodes air and people let us know. But we always say we love it when people let us know we do things wrong so we can do them more correct in the future. Other than that, we have, of course, the Power Phase, Monday nights, 7 p.m. right here on this twitch.tv/professional casual network. I'm actually getting back in the ring. It's been a little while, letting other people have some turns since Chuck was back from his work schedule, is allowing him to play again, so we kind of let him have a few weeks in a row. Back to me versus Tim this coming week. If you're watching this on YouTube, it would have been 2 weeks ago, where I'm playing a throw-themed list with A-Force. I got She-Hulk, Wasp, Storm, Captain Marvel, and Toad. And my whole goal of the game is to have everybody throw something at least once. With Toad, he could throw something. I've got the Heave Ho card and the Pim Particles card, so the Wasp can make something small. Toad can throw it, and it'll turn big on its way before it hits somebody. So, excited for that. Not sure what Tim's doing, but happy to be playing the game again. It's been almost a month since I've played, which is too long. Hey, Wargaming Dad. Hey, the Wargaming Dad. How you doing? So, yeah, that's kind of it for what's gaming. Danny and Chuck played last week on the Power Phase. It was a great game to watch. They both did really well. And they talked about it on, did I roll Wild, which comes out on Tuesdays, where is our kind of talk show about Marvel Crisis Protocol news, recap of the game from the week, and that kind of stuff. That's super fun as well. Hopefully I'll be on that. That comes out on Tuesdays, not this coming Tuesday. It'll be Tim, Chuck, and Danny joined. They talked about the Scarlet Witch panel to play reveal and a couple other things. And then hopefully I'll be back on that next week. They haven't been able to be on that show for a while, various reasons, but looking forward to it. Alright, so the Black Library recommendation of the week. I already talked about a book that takes place in Kislev. Way back in the beginning, I talked about Riders of the Dead. So if you're looking at something that features Kislevites or in Kislev, Riders of the Dead would be fantastic. I can't remember what episode exactly that was, but it was near the beginning. Wargaming Dad says the Scarlet Witch looks so good. Yeah, seriously, I love that she apparently does things when she rolls skulls on attacks or something, but we'll find out in a couple of weeks for sure. But for this week, I decided to recommend a book about a Kislevite. I think this is the first one of Ulrika the Vampire, called Bloodforged by Nathan Long. Mostly I picked this one to talk about today because I love this cover. I can't remember. I think this is the first one. There are 3, as usual. Nathan Long wrote these after his stint, or maybe it was during his stint on Gotrek and Felix. Ulrika is a character from that series. She is a Kislevite noble who later on in the Gotrek and Felix series, she kind of joins their party, and she becomes a vampire, which is kind of cool. So she has her own little series. If memory serves, it takes place in Nuln, I'm pretty certain, and it's a lot of like swashbuckling / court intrigue. I like these ones a lot. She was like learning how to be part of the Lamian vampire like society in Nuln and kind of fitting in with that, learning their ways, how to live in the city and be part of the society, but also be a vampire, which there are literally vampire hunters in the Empire that would kill them if they knew. So the whole survival aspect as well. This whole series is pretty good. Bloodborne is first. Thank you, Bastion. I couldn't remember, but like I said, I picked this one because I like this cover. I think it's cool. Ulrika taking the mask off with her rapier there. Just really good artwork. So really here I'm just recommending the Ulrika the Vampire series. Real good stuff. Working to also set a condition for each skull, and skulls count as hits as well for Scarlet Witch and MCP. That is fantastic. That's no wonder she's 5 threat. But Ulrika, I like Ulrika too because she's a good character in that not only is she like a strong female character, which we didn't see in fantasy for a long time, but she is tortured in that she had this relationship with Felix of Gotrek and Felix, and that was kind of taken away when she became a vampire, and she's trying to find her own way. And I don't know, I've always really liked Ulrika. I thought what they did to her in the Gotrek and Felix, the last 2 novels, was crappy. I really didn't like. It was Kinslayer and Slayer were the last 2 Gotrek and Felix books, and I just felt like they were hot garbage. Sebastian brings up Genevieve, also a vampire, as a strong female character earlier in fantasy fiction. I mean, what I've read of Genevieve so far, she's just kind of been there. She's done virtually nothing between Drakenfels and the Beast in Velvet. I thought those were great books, but as far as Genevieve being a strong female character, not in those. No, she was just there. She didn't do anything. I need to read more books that are more about Genevieve herself before I can actually agree or disagree with that. But I think from what I understand, Bastion, you've read all those, so you would know better than I would. So I'll take your word for it. That obviously that's become less of a problem in more recent publishing trends, and realizing that women are people too, and they should be represented same as men. Which is why my book Lania the Girl Without Fear, the protagonist is a strong female character who just kind of kicks ass. They aren't Genevieve books. Exactly, yeah. Drakenfels and Beast and Velvet are not. They're labeled as vampire Genevieve books, but they're not about her anyway. So I need to read more about Genevieve herself to learn more about that character. All right, so this week we're talking about Kislev. We got the land to the north, really northeast of the Empire, and really excited for. I love Kislev. I love all things ice. We've talked about my Iceman poster on the wall over there. He's my favorite superhero. Just ice powers, I just think are the coolest, pun intended. And I don't know, they've always struck a chord with me. I love that kind of stuff. Actually, wearing my Iceman shirt, just kind of a happy accident. Cool artwork on there. Chris, I can never remember how to say his name. Chris Bacalo, something like that. One of my favorite artists. He has done a lot of work with X-Men. But Kislev being the frozen north there and having ice magic and whatnot, I love Kislev. So luckily, after last week finishing talking about High Elves, I said I was going to do Kislev next. I immediately turned around to look at my books behind me, and I found I still had the original, not original, but this is from like 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Like mini army book. It's a little pamphlet. It's let's see, it's only 34 pages, and a lot of there's actually a really cool book because a lot of it's rules, a very small amount of it is rules actually. A lot of it is like painting guides. There's like a catalog page from way back when. This is from 2003, if you're wondering. Very, very different way GW did things back then. Yeah, 2003. There's like painting tutorials. There's even a few pages about building terrain to make it look more Kislev. Some painting thing, how to paint your Griffin Legion, how to make trees. Like, it'd be nice if GW still did stuff like that. How to make terrain, how to make a whole snowboard home, make it look like you're fighting Kislev. A little showcase of somebody's Kislev army with bear cavalry that weren't actually rules in the game, but still pretty cool. This was Dave Taylor's army from, almost 20 years ago. Other variant schemes, different way to paint the troops. New rules for ice magic, and there was a like exclusive scenario in this book. So really cool stuff. But I was really excited for it because it had like I say basic because it kind of covers the basics of the region. A bunch of pages of fluff, really good stuff. Lore there. That was an awesome source that I used. I read that whole thing in like a day because there's not that much to it. My other big source was the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition, Realm of the Ice Queen, a book all about Kislev, a guide to Kislev. And it was interesting after reading the old Warhammer Fantasy Battles book and then reading Realm of the Ice Queen. A lot of stuff was just copy pasted from the older source, which was really funny to me because the Realm of the Ice Queen, I believe, is from 2007. 2007 for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition. Kind of in, heyday of it. The art for Kislev in the upcoming Old World looks good. Yes, Bastion, I totally agree. It looks awesome. They finally have bear cavalry. That was one of the first things they showed. They showed cool ice weapons. We don't really know anything about the game itself, but war bears for the win. Yeah, I mean, come on, bear cavalry, awesome. I played Troll Bloods briefly I still have them all, but in War Machine Hordes, and when they added ambush bears, I forget what they're actually called, but everybody called them ambush bears because they were polar. It was a unit of 2 polar bears with like a goater trollkin, and they had the ambush rule, so they could pop up because they like blended in or whatever. So everybody just called them ambush bears. And they were awesome. I don't think I've ever actually got to play with them. I think by the time those came out, nobody around here was playing War Machine anymore. So I had gotten like all that new stuff that came out because they were called Northkin. So it was very ice stuff. They actually had like an ice troll and a guy that threw another troll that held like a big icicle that he would throw like a javelin, and the Glacier King, my favorite model ever, probably. He's this big. Took me, I don't even know how many hours to paint, but still probably my favorite painted model. The one I'm most proud of. And someday I'll probably try to sell it for a bunch of money because it was like 150 new, to buy, and having put all that time in it, I probably wouldn't want less than like $600 for it. But maybe someday. It lives in my display case and people think it looks cool because it does. But I was super excited for that stuff. But when that came out, the area wasn't playing War Machine anymore. I think by then 8th edition 40K had been out, and that kind of was the king of games around here for a long time until MCP. And then the pandemic hit, so nobody was playing games anyway, but MCP we have kept alive through sheer grit and determination, and playing, being close friends with the store owner, letting us play and stream when the store is closed is super helpful. So, lore focus. Kislev, Land of the North. I got a cool map of Kislev from that Realm of the Ice Queen book I found online. This book had amazing maps. I'm pretty sure this was the when they really got Andy Law doing a lot of their cartography back when it was still published by Black Industries and it was still like in-house kind of stuff. Cartography is by Andrew Law, yeah, and Andy Law is great. He's still real big in the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay community, and he's helped us out with some rules here and there on Facebook, which is awesome. So Kislev, a lot of people talk about it being like the Russia of Warhammer. A little bit of research I did back in the day, I found it's more like Russia plus the Ukraine, which some people might argue is very similar anyway, but it has a lot of those tones to it. It's kind of like the Near East idea, and it's cool. It has a lot of Russian aesthetics in the design of things, which is really neat. And the stories behind them are really cool. So Kislev is in an interesting place. Some borders we talk about, they're kind of ill-defined between the Kislev and Empire. Kislev is named after the city of Kislev, which is kind of interesting. The city was built first, and then people kept just assumed anybody from the region was from Kislev, so the whole land ended up being called Kislev. And the border is often seen as the border of the forest, where we have Ostland and Ostermark there. Some argue it goes up to certain rivers would be the border. Basically, once the forest ends, you're in Kislev, which is kind of neat. And then it continues until the World's Edge Mountains, of course, and it goes north until you get to Troll Country, which some people still live there. It's just incredibly dangerous. It's called Troll Country for a reason. And to the north, it's also bordered by the Goromadny Mountains as well before you get to the frozen sea. So it's kind of hemmed in on all sides. Further north is Norska, where the Norse are from, of course, and then the west of Kislev is kind of the Empire / the Sea of Claws. So Kislev is a huge space, about the size of the Empire, a little smaller than the Empire maybe, but it's mostly open plains and steppes. They do have their own forest up against the World's Edge Mountains, but Kislev is mostly known for its open plains and its horse lords and that kind of thing. So it's these great the steppes, right? We have these huge expanses of essentially nothing, grass plains, some rivers here and there, but people have settled it quite well. So Kislev as a nation is really interesting to me because it's essentially two nations. We've got two different groups of people that live here. The natives, there were a couple different tribes, but really it's become, in more recent history, we have the Ungols. There are some, they're called the Ropsmen, that mostly lived in the area that is now called Troll Country, and they're essentially wiped out. There are a few of them left, but as like a people, they're not really around anymore. And the Ungol are seen as more primitive or barbaric by a lot of people, but they're people just trying to live in their own region, and they have their own way of doing things. It's interesting, in all the artwork and models they had of Ungols, they're always shirtless, which is just like, it's super cold where you live. Why do you not have shirts on? But it's more of just a way to differentiate like the models back in the day. Obviously, they would be covered in furs and things when they're outside. They don't have any kind of magical abilities we'll get to later. But the Ungols are like the biggest surviving tribe from back in the day, and they kind of make up most of like the common people, I guess you could say. They live out on the steppes. They live more in the northern parts of Kislev. Places like, if they were to live in cities, it would be places like Prague, maybe Erengrad, if I can remember how to say these places. We all know that I'm fantastic at pronunciation of things. And between those two and Kislev make up the only major cities in the entire nation. Kislev being the largest and the capital, of course. Erengrad is a massive port city, and Prague is messed up. We'll talk about that a little bit here and there. Along with the Ungols that make up the majority of the population of Kislev, just because they are spread out throughout all the plains and steppes of the land, we also have the Gospodar, who are incredibly important for Kislev history, especially because they weren't originally Kislevites. They actually came over from the east across the World's Edge Mountains, and they were an invading force of people that kind of took over and founded the city of Kislev and just kind of made a new home here and became like the kind of ruling class. They're seen as more, especially to people of the Empire, they're seen as more of the like civilized people. The Gospodars typically live in the cities of either Kislev, Erengrad, and to some extent Prague. But they also have lots of larger towns that they live in as well. But they typically live in the southern parts of Kislev, closer to the Empire. They have a lot of those similar traits to like Ostlanders and Ostermarkers, those that live in Ostermark. And they share a lot of physical and trait and behavioral traits with them as they've kind of mingled over the years. Kislev is also interesting because it is much younger than the Empire. I want to talk about some of the dates here. I don't usually bring up dates and stuff like that, but I feel like with Kislev especially, it's important because Kislev wasn't even founded until. Uh, oh, I thought it gave me the imperial years here. It was, believe, less than 1,000 years before the current time of Warhammer. It was the imperial calendar 1524, so about 1,000 years because most things when we talk about Warhammer take place around 2522 is when the Storm of Chaos happened. 2512 is the time of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition officially takes place in 2512. Bastion says, Mina! Yeah, because she's from Ostermark, above the Middle Mountains there. So Kislev, as a nation, is relatively young compared to other places in the world, being about 1,000, just under 1,000 years old. And it was just these Gospodar people moved in, and they were just kind of like, all right, we're taking over. And the Ungols just couldn't stand against them. They had their heavy horse cavalry, were very strong. The Ungols were just not as regimented, and they just couldn't stand up to them, and they ended up just kind of assimilating and kind of becoming one people. The Ungols and Gospodar still live their lives pretty separately, but together they are the Kislevites, right? They are Kislev. Oops, sorry about that. So the last part, well, I guess not the last part, but another part of their society I really want to discuss here are the Ice Witches. There are a couple other things going on, of course. It's not just those three groups. There's hags as well. But ice witches are super cool. First of all, ice magic. Yes, please. And the idea here is really neat that every once in a while you have a woman of Kislev that's born with the ability not just to wield magic, but to wield ice magic specifically. Winds of magic for this type of magic run heavily through Kislev, and the Ice Witches have become this sisterhood that they're not just like random people doing whatever with their magic. Once they're kind of like it has Jedi ideals to me, where it seems that similar idea where they every year they have like they try to collect up anybody, young girls that have shown the affinity for magics, and they will be taken as an apprentice to an ice witch and taught how to wield these dangerous magics. They'll do this at all levels of their society, Ungol and Gospodar alike. Interestingly, they find them more often in the noble bloodlines of the Gospodar, which is kind of neat. They're not as often found among the Ungols, that or they're just not as acknowledged as often in the Ungols, or the Ungols realize this earlier in the girl's life and they are taken as to be part of the hag society and taken away that way to learn their hedge wizardry that way. So Ice Witch is super cool. Ice magic is just naturally very dangerous and deadly. So they're fantastic on the battlefield, just like summoning, ice storms and icicles to skewer enemies and freezing people solid. But it's also just as dangerous to the witches themselves. They say most young women that become ice witches end up dying from it. They lose control of this primal force and end up being frozen solid themselves. Bastion said, does ice magic fit into the winds paradigm? So yeah, it's kind of weird. We talk about the 8 winds of magic. That is actually simplified by the elves for humans, for the colleges, right? So Teclis and his the other wizard that survived the Great War against Chaos. I said a couple weeks ago now, I can't remember their name. Taught the humans magic, and to help humans understand it, they explained it as the 8 winds, right? So let's see. For the lore of ice, and ice magic is unique to Kislev because there are these ley lines that run throughout the land of Kislev. And the Ice Witches, a big part of their sisterhood is keeping these ley lines safe. Where they intersect, there are almost always some kind of Ogham stones, big menhirs, big standing stones. Some of them have even elven ruins where elves have been here, taking care of these ley lines. So ice witches will basically like get jobs within their sisterhood to go and protect these intersections. Because if something were to happen to them, there's potential that they could go so far as to lose their powers. So pretty much every Stanista, as they call the different little cities and villages around Kislev, has like their resident ice witch who's there, living there, and her job is to protect the Ogam Stone, but living with the people at the same time. The ice witches are seen, and they're kind of regarded with a little bit of fear, much respect, and a lot of trepidation as well. The ice witches are known for their power. They're known for being cold-hearted because we know with all the different lores of magic, as people practice this magic, they become more and more like that lore attributes. So ice witches tend to become kind of like cold-hearted is the idea there, where they're like not as empathetic to things. Bastion said, "I either forgotten that or never knew." Very interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. I like how it's pretty unique to Kislev. I'm sure the elves or lizardmen could do it if they wanted to. It's probably I would imagine it takes threads from the lore of heavens, probably from the lore of death as well to create ice magic. But as far as I was reading, it's its own separate thing. What was I saying? The ice witches have like an official headquarters in Erengrad called Frostholm, I do believe was the name of it. It's just like a giant ice building, and where they have their yearly meeting, where they go and have a caucus where they meet and talk about how things are going, to meet up with friends, to assign apprentices, things like that. Frostholm, yeah, I think I said that right. And this usually lasts a couple days to a week, and they basically plan out things for the next year. The current Tsarina, Katerin herself, is an ice witch, and once in a while she actually joins this. I thought that was great. This was described in Realm of the Ice Queen, where they meet purposely on the summer solstice, because that is the time of year when ice magic is the weakest. So if they get into an argument about something, they are less likely to solve it using their magics and potentially hurting somebody. I thought was a really cool idea. One thing I was mentioning about magic with the Ungols earlier, it is illegal for men to practice any kind of wizardry in Kislev as a Kislevite. There's like an old prophecy that someday the line, like the sisterhood of the ice witches, will be undone by a male wizard with ice magics that will completely undo everything that they've been doing for the last 1,000 years. Ice witches were a huge part of the reason why the Gospodar were able to take over this region and to become like the central power of Kislev. They came over with them, and the first Tsarina was also an ice witch as well. Her name, I had a second ago, was Khan Queen Shoika. I do believe she was the first Tsarina. She conquered the lands to the north of the river Urskoy, which runs right through Kislev, and the city of Kislev, I should say, and was one of those founding ice witches as well, which is super cool. But yeah, so men that are born with the powers of magic are... see you, Gore Gaming Dead. See you tomorrow night. Hopefully I can roll well consistently and not make too many boneheaded moves. But men that are born in Kislev with the powers of magic have a few options. Often they're just killed because they know that if like the family doesn't kill them, somebody else will come and do that to stop this from happening. Because again, those ice witches, being cold-hearted, are like, I don't care, you're going to ruin our society, you're dead. Those that have the money and influence can kind of ship their son away to Altdorf, to the colleges of magic, maybe even Mindenheim. They have some magic schools there as well, where they can send them to the colleges of magic and learn magic in the Empire, and just never come back to Kislev. The ice witches don't like this either, because it still shows that men can be wizards, even if it's not here. So they try to put a stop to that when they can. So I love this idea that they are protectors of the land, but at any cost, and they will literally kill babies to stop anything that could upset their way of life. And I thought was just kind of, it's so Warhammer to me. Speaking of things that are so Warhammer, let's talk about the Kislev gods pretty quick. Like anywhere else in the old world, there are lots of minor gods. The ice witches venerate the who gave them the power of ice magic. They call the Ancient Widow, which is really cool. But in the greater society at large, there are three main gods, of course, starting with Urson, the Bear King. So this image here is from Realm of the Ice Queen. Is really interesting to me. We see this dude up front. That's not Urson. Urson is the bear himself. Urson, the Bear King, is depicted as a massive, like grizzly-looking bear, like a cave bear that wears a crown, which is awesome. And he's all about, strength and survival and all that. And he is the patron god of Kislev that I believe the Gospodar brought with them. And he's like Urson's the one that gave them the strength to come and conquer this area. I love the idea of Urson because he's all about being a strong individual and surviving off the land and all that. And his strictures are really interesting to me because it's not what I would expect. So a couple of them are never hunt a bear in the winter. Let them sleep. The bear's hibernating. Like, don't kill a bear in its den while it's hibernating. There's no honor in that. It's against the god's wishes, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you do that too much, there's no bears left anyway. You would wipe them out pretty easily. Bears must always be killed by hand or arrow. No dogs or traps. I love that one, where the idea of killing a bear with a man's bare hands, which is just kind of insane, but only with arrows too. Like, whoa, that's impressive. Only where the skin, claw, or skull of a bear you have killed yourself. Right. So somebody like I love the idea that you're not going to pass down these pelts from like father to son kind of thing because if they didn't kill the bear, they should not wear it, according to the teachings of Urson. Does everybody follow this in Kislev? No, of course not. But those that are devout Ursurans, what do you call somebody that worships? I guess Ursurans would follow that to the T. Yeah, Bash says bare hands. Yeah, I said that on purpose. That's just how it's worded as well. Let's see. The next one is eat fish at least once per week, but never eat fish and other meat on the same day. Seems sensible. And then never perform your ablutions indoors. Right? So you never worship Urson under a roof. You need to do it outside. I like Urson. He's cool. We'll talk about Tsar Boris and how he is like a warrior priest, sort of Urson, how he brought worship of that god back. And had it become more of the patron god of Kislev. I almost said the Empire. I was like, that's not right. Next up, we have Daz, or Daz. I'm going to say Daz. That sounds more like how they pronounce it. Daz is the god of fire and sun. Of course, fire is incredibly important to the Kislevs, even more than other nations, because it is so cold. Fire is necessary for survival anywhere, but in the wilds of Kislev, out in the frozen steppes, fire is immensely important. So Daz is often depicted as a young man with long, flowing golden hair and shining eyes, kind of similar to Apollo from Greek mythology. And he, again, you're not to worship him inside. He needs to be out in the sun, of course. The summer solstice is his biggest holy day because it's the longest day of the year. It's when Daz shines bright on them longest. I have not read Something Rotten in Kislev from first edition. Bastion asks, no. I've heard about it. I love that title, Something Rotten in Kislev. I don't know anything about the adventure itself, other than I've heard it. Actually, I haven't heard that much about it. I've heard it's good. I've heard it's bad. That kind of stuff. I don't know too much about it. Daz has some awesome strictures as well. Always offer hospitality, even to strangers and enemies. Right, surviving the realm, the dangerous environs is something that should be helped. You should help anybody do this, even if they're your enemy, which I thought was really interesting. Never let a fire go out during the night. The god of fire and sun, that makes a lot of sense, yeah. Never set a fire on a dirty hearth. I love the idea of worshiper of Daz would have to clean out the fire pit every day before starting a new fire. And then offer prayers to Daz on the first morning that winter snows cover the ground. Right? It's like, oh, well, snow's here, but we're going to worship Daz anyway. Bastion says something rotten in Kislev was the original fourth part of the enemy within. Got some good Kislev stuff in it. That's about all I know about it, is it was the original fourth part, but they're changing it for 4th edition. I'm hoping it still goes to Kislev. I would love to see a 4th edition source book about Kislev. And Realm of the Ice Cream is fantastic, but I'd love to see something, with the Cubicle 7 spin on it, see how they do with things. And the last major god of Kislev is Tor. Not Thor. Tor. He is the god of thunder and lightning. He doesn't wield a hammer. He wields an axe with a handle made out of oak, specifically. And the head of it is silvered, which is really cool. Tor, of course, he's a warrior. He's a god of the sky, of thunder and lightning and all that. And he's also the Kislev warrior god. So as people go to war, they might say a small prayer to Tor to strengthen their arm and that kind of thing. He only has one stricture for the cult of Tor, and it never stand under a tree during a thunderstorm. Well, the Kislevs are nothing if not practical. Nothing if not pragmatic. I love these guys. So those are the major gods of Kislev. So let's talk about a little. Mentioned the cities before. There's this kind of cool picture from Realm of the Ice Queen. I don't know. This one made me think of like Avatar: The Last Airbender, like the North and South Pole homes. Just kind of cool looking. Thor without the H for hammer. Nice. Thank you, Bastion. Yeah. I like the idea of Tor. He's pretty cool. So we're talking about the people of Kislev. We talked about Ungols and Gospodar. How do they make up their armies? So every town, village, city musters what's called a rota, ROTA, where basically people are essentially conscripted into their armed forces. The Ungols are known mostly for their Ungol horse archers, which are like peerless at what they do. Fast cavalry. That wear no armor, their horses aren't barded, so they can be as quick as possible, and they just have short bows that they loose volley after volley of arrows into. Obviously, very inspired by Mongol horse archers, which the Ungols. I mean, they're called Ungols. They're very close, same kind of idea. As for the Gospodar, then we have what's called Kossars, which are like the line infantry of Kislev, which are made up of a mixture of Gospodar and Ungols, and they fight with a unique style where they have a heavy axe and a bow, a short bow, and they will fire to the short bows until the enemy is close enough, and then they are trained to lightning fast switch out the bow for their heavy axe, and that way they can get another volley or two in before the enemy gets to them, which makes them very deadly. They also have I forget. They were a career you could play in Warhammer Fantasy 2nd Edition. Really cool, called Strelets. I can never say it. Streltsy? I think Streltsy. And their thing was they fought with a halberd, but similar to the Kossars, when they fire their bows, they actually had arquebuses. They had like flintlock rifles that they would use their halberds as a stand for it, and then they would use that until they got close, and then they could stow the arquebus real quick and then fight with a halberd in close combat. And I love these guys. One of the few times I actually got to play as a player, not as the GM for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I played a Streltsy. I can't remember the character's name, but his handgun he did call Alexandra. He had a name for it, and he was awesome. It was really fun to play up the language barrier, where he could speak. He spoke Kislev, of course. They have their own language, but he also spoke Reichspiel, but he was like really bad at it. I think he was trained, and that was it. So like he knew Reichspiel, but I often played up that he didn't understand everything people were saying. He didn't understand like idioms and sayings and whatnot. So like somebody would say like take care of him. There was one famous time we were playing the Thousand Thrones campaign, the last thing that came out for 2nd edition. GB was running it from a GB from a Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure was running it, and we were interrogating somebody in Middenheim. I think is where we started that game, and somebody said, "Okay, we're done here. Let's take care of this guy." So my guy was like, "Okay," so I just shot him while we were with this rifle in this room, and I think we ended up doing a critical hit. We rolled for it, and I shot his foot off. Which was kind of amazing. And everybody was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "You said take care of him. I missed." So I remember we took the foot. I don't remember why, but I took the foot as like a trophy or proof that we took care of this person. And then we were like on the run for just murdering this. They ended up bleeding out, of course. So the party was like on the run because we killed this person. And I remember JB being like, "All right, well, now I got to figure out how that's going to fit into the story." We didn't, and unfortunately, the game fizzled out not long after that. But that character was super fun. Which I would be fun to try to find his character sheet, Alexandra. But yeah, and then the rest of their army is mostly heavy horse, heavy cavalry. The vast majority of them are winged lancers. I have this cool picture from Realm of the Ice Queen showing this charge into probably Kurgan lines, marauders from Norska. And we see they're called winged lancers, of course, because of these big wing pinions they have on their back. And these warriors need to go find their own feathers for this. The most famous Winged Lancers regiment are known as the Griffin Legion, because one of their leaders, they were campaigning in the World's Edge Mountains, and their one leader famously killed a griffin by himself and used the griffin feathers for his wing, and they became the Griffin Legion, and they are like actually a very famous mercenary group that spends a lot of time making money in the Empire. When they do come back to Kislev, they are a force to be reckoned with, and they are mostly noted for the paintings they do on their horses, where they paint a lot, like basically the bottom half of their horses blood red, which just kind of looks cool. So Griffin Legion are awesome. All right, before my voice gives out, there's two more things I want to talk about with Kislev today. Which will be the most prominent figures of Kislev, which are, of course, Tsar Rody Boka, Tsar Boris, the Red Tsar, and his daughter Tsarina Katerin Boka. So I'm talking about Tsar Boris. I couldn't find I couldn't find a picture of him other than his model from way back in the day, from like 2003, where he's riding his bear Erskine, I believe is his name, who is what in Warhammer it would be called an ice bear. We would refer to as a polar bear, of course. Big white bear. Erskine, I was right. And Boris was cool because he took over as Tsar from his father. And it was after the Great War Against Chaos, of course. Prague was completely razed. After they retook the city, Kislev, the people raised it themselves. They burned it down because it had become so corrupted by chaos. Asavar Kol had taken it over. They just destroyed the city themselves and rebuilt. But a lot of Kislev hadn't recovered from the Great War, even though was like 200 years ago, almost at this point, when Boris took over. He became the Tsar in... Where's my little time here? He became the Tsar in the 968 of the Kislev calendar, which was about 30 years in the past. So it would have been I think it was like 2490 something in the imperial calendar. He became the Tsar, and his big thing was, we need to rebuild Kislev to what it was again before the Great War Against Chaos. We need to rebuild and basically bring it back to its former glory. And he was really good at this. He basically did it during his time. He was known as Boris the Red, or Rody Boka, because of how amazing he was in combat. He was a devout follower of Urson, and he was hugely influential in that cult. Excuse me. He was hugely influential in that cult becoming like the preeminent religion in Kislev again. The cult of Urson often butts heads with Ulrich, both being like winter gods, kind of bear versus wolf kind of thing. So I love that idea. But he was very devout follower of Urson, and during this, before he became the Tsar, what was it after? No, it was after he became the Tsar. He, because of how he fought in battle, he became known as Rodi Boka, or Boka the Red, because of how he defeated a large army of beastmen outside of Prague a few years, the year after he became Tsar. A few years after that, let's see, that was 969, he became known as Boka the Red, and then 973, he went out into the wilds as a devotee of Urson to either kill a bear on his own to be able to wear its skin, or basically befriend one in a way. And he ended up coming back with Erskine, this huge ice bear. And the story behind it was that he went out, he found Erskine, and they started fighting, and Boris did it barehanded. He was not armed in any way, and he fought this bear for a day. And I love stuff like this with Warhammer. Like, okay, fantasy world, got to remember that. It's ridiculous, but fantasy and legend. The idea of what happened here, and Boris went unconscious during the fight. He was losing, of course, because it was a huge bear. And while this was happening, a bunch of wolves attacked, and the bear, for whatever reason, decided to protect Boris's prone form. Probably because he was. They say that Erskine was sent by Urson to test Boris, and Boris passed the test. So then the bear protected him from this pack of wolves and brought him back. And then they became like friends, and he uses Erskine as a mount. And Erskine is awesome, giant polar bear. And then Boris the Red ruled for a while, about 30 years, until he went into Troll Country on a campaign and was killed in a battle where he charged forward with winged lancers deep into Kurgan lines. Was it Kurgan specifically? Doesn't say here. I read the other story, but I believe it was Kurgan, Norskins, and he drove the line deep into the Kurgan army, and then he ended up being the only survivor from that. Him and Urson fought until Boka died in the saddle, and then Urson was able, just because of his sheer ferocity, was able to fight his way free and actually returned Boris to the city of Kislev, and then just disappeared into the wilderness. And then his daughter, Katerin Boka, was crowned the Tsarina. And Katerin she is an ice witch, a very, very powerful ice witch. That's why she's the Ice Queen. And she is known for her kind of aloofness and just cold demeanor towards everybody. But she is a very well-loved, respected, and feared ruler. She doesn't often take to the field of battle, but when she does, she turns the tide by herself. In game terms, she was a level 4 ice wizard. She was the only ice wizard in the game, I think, ever. Maybe till the very end of the Warhammer Fantasy battles, but she was a very powerful figure. She had a magic cloak. She had a magic sword. She could bring Griffin Legion easier. She could have more Griffin Legion in her army, and she was just a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, but also in like the staterooms. Someone's not happy. I think Felix woke up from his nap and he's screaming. Oops. Yikes. I wonder what that's all about. But Tsarina Katerin she's been a really good thing for Kislev, but Tsar Boris was, Katerina is as well. In the time of like the current timeline of Warhammer Fantasy, she is the current ruler, and seems like she does a good job. Things are still improving in Kislev, from the Great War Against Chaos, as Boris was doing. Katerin. I don't know why. For the longest time I thought her name was Katerina, but apparently it's Katerin. There's no A at the end. Is doing the same thing and improving the lands all the time. And as an ice witch, she is, very connected to the land itself and these ley lines and these Ogham stones and everything. So very, very important for her to do these things, to keep keep the peace, essentially. So yeah, that's Kislev. Whew, my throat hurts for some reason. I feel like that was more talking than usual. Just to give people an idea of what's coming up next week, exciting. We'll be talking about Tomb Kings. We're going to go from the frozen, icy lands of the north to the dry, desolate deserts of Araby and the lands of the dead. And you're here to hear first. We're going to have a special guest. Danny is returning because she did play Tomb Kings as her first army for Warhammer Fantasy Battles. She said she would join me to talk about the restless undead down in Kemri. We'll talk about things like the skeletons there, Ushabti, some of the special characters. Her favorite thing ever was one reason she went with Tomb Kings, partly because she got a really good deal buying the army from my brother, but she loved that she could field a woman general special character. She was in love with Queen Neferata and her poison staff and whatnot. So super exciting. She's going to join me next week. So that'll be next Sunday, of course, 1 p.m. to start off the professional casual week. And then Mondays, you can see Danny again, as she is the GM of the Lost Omens podcast, where we play Pathfinder 2nd Edition. She's running 5 of us knuckleheads through the Extinction Curse adventure path. I think we are, time of this recording, the episodes that are coming out, we're nearing the end of our first major dungeon, the Hermitage of Blessed Lightning. And it's really, really good stuff. This show's so funny. It's ridiculous. My face hurts before we even hit the record button from how much fun it is. What we've recorded recently has been the best stuff we've done so far. It just keeps getting better. We're learning the system better. We're getting to know our characters better. And the role play is just top notch, I think. Not to toot my own horn since I am a player in that game, but I believe all around the table, the roleplay is just amazing. And if you haven't yet, definitely check that one out. Whether you care about Pathfinder or not, I don't think it matters. It's a good story and great characters, and Danny does an awesome job as GM. And then Monday nights, of course, we have the Power Phase. We play Marvel Crisis Protocol. We stream that from Bearded Dragon. You can check out beardeddragongames.online. Use promo code Professional Casual to get, I think now, you can use a new code Anthony made, PCME10, and they'll get you 10% off your order. Tuesdays, we've got Wait, Did I Roll a Wild? Our Pavlog, as Chuck has named it. It comes out as a podcast and a video and a vlog on YouTube where we talk about all things Crisis Protocol. We talk about the game from the week before. We talk about any news that AMG has come out with. We talk about wish lists, and we have a lot of predictions that are usually wrong, but still really fun. Wednesday is Patreon Day, where we have all kinds of bonus content, vlogs. Tim does updates on the network here and there. Charlie's got like his tasty treats, and sometimes he does like reviews or blind reactions, like when he first watched the Mortal Kombat trailer, because he loves Mortal Kombat. He'll probably do a review of the movie as well. I don't know. I'm gonna guess. Also, every other week at this time, we have the Southlands campaign on Wednesdays. The podcast version is Patreon exclusive. The video version of that is on Patreon, but will be on YouTube on like a month delay, or a monthly that will be coming out on YouTube. So it'll be a major delay as we go. But that's available to patrons at the $10 tier and above. And that's super, super fun when we have a new team, a new party for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, heading down to the Southlands in a homebrew campaign that I've been writing. Super, super fun. The characters for that are the best. I love them so much already. Thursdays is a Grim Podcast, a Perilous Adventure, our original Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition actual play show. We're playing The Enemy Within. Where episode 50 is our next one to come out, which is a doozy. We did a super extra long episode for everybody. Hopefully people will love that. Bastion says Lilibeth rules. Liliana, you mean? Because there's Liliana and Bethan. So I'm assuming you mean Liliana, the halfling. New to the network, Jess is playing Liliana Pine Swoop, halfling rat catcher in the Southlands campaign with her small but average but vicious dog named Vicious. She's so funny. She was a perfect fit for the group, since JB wasn't able to join us for that campaign, in addition to everything else he does for the network. But yeah, if you haven't listened to the Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure, if you're listening to this, you should definitely be listening to that. It's so good. I mean, just The Enemy Within is the best campaign I've ever played and run anything, and the role playing in that game is just that is top notch. Not as a player of that one, as the GM, so I can definitely say it's top notch. They just get the best. They're the best. They're so good, and it was right out of the gate. I I had expectations for role playing in that game, and everybody just went above and beyond right from the beginning, and it was so good. It still is so good. Like I said, coming out this coming Thursday, the time of recording of this. If you're watching YouTube, obviously it'll be a little bit different. The April, that's not the right app. There's the calendar. What day is Thursday? The 29th. April 29th is our episode 50. We got some new announcements there, and just a great episode full of role play and developments and all kinds of stuff. So really looking forward to that. Friday is Big Chuck and Tim's Bonkers Elite 8 Showdown, where they take some random thing they decided to talk about that week. Not really random, they plan it out a bit. And they put them into an 8-subject single elimination bracket and debate the topic. The last couple of weeks were about King of the Hill, where they did the best, most underrated side character, and then last week's was the best character King of the Hill, with special guest Ben, who was on the Lost Omens podcast, and he has a couple of his own podcasts, the Cartoon Cast, where he goes deep dives into cartoons, and the Watchtower, where he's doing a episode by episode review of the Justice League cartoon that he's in love with. And that is the Professional Casual Week. So much content for you. If you haven't yet, please consider joining the Patreon at patreon.com/professionalcasual for the month of May, which obviously isn't yet a time of recording, but if you're watching this later on the YouTube, month of May, a bunch of us are donating for every 5-star review one of our shows gets. For Lost Omens, the Graham Podcast of Perilous Adventure, and Elite 8 Showdown, for every 5-star review they get on iTunes, a bunch of us are donating $5 each to I can never remember the name of it, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. With May being Mental Health Awareness Month, it's a really near and dear to our hearts topic. So I know that there are at least 5 or 6 or even 7 or 8 people, I think it might be up to now, that are each donating $5 for every 5-star review we get. So we're up to like $45 or $50 per review that we are donating to this amazing charity, and just really excited for that. So if you haven't yet, get those reviews in starting May 1st. Other than that, thanks for watching, thanks for joining, thanks Bastion for hanging out, and I'll see you hopefully I'll see you tomorrow for the Power Phase, 7 p.m. Eastern. Otherwise, I'll see you here next week, and keep gaming.